Welcome to a very special series here on Headroom. Travel to the Holy Land of Jordan and to the capital city of Amman. A generous people steeped in shared displacement over generations, forming a lively culture of food, family, respect, and tradition. Journey with me across the world to Amman, Jordan. This is Headroom.
Well, Yousef, I just want to say I've been very lucky to interview lots of incredible people and thoughtful people around the world over the last decade, and oftentimes I feel as if I press the record button at just the right time. But we've already been talking for about 10 or 15 minutes, and in the back of my mind I've been thinking, I wish I would have been recording, because I'm very much looking forward to what we now will talk about officially, because of just already the nature of the discussion I thought was very compelling. We're here to talk a little bit about Venture X and the origins of it, sort of what the objectives are. But if we don't mind, because we have the time, I would love for the audience to understand who you are, who I am sitting next to in a shared space. So give me a little bit of the personal story of you, Yousef, here as we sit in Amman, Jordan.
I mean, first, thanks for the opportunity. Drawing the canvas, basically, of my background, it's quite, I would say, at least diverse and compelling. So I was born in Beirut. I was born on the 1st of January. Why was I born in Beirut? The reason for that specifically was that 10 years before that date, 9 years and a half probably, in 1962 there was a coup in Yemen. My father was studying German. He was basically studying economics in Germany. And September 26 came along, and he hears in the news that there's a coup in Yemen, and his father, amongst many others, were executed. So September 26 was really that, to create this paradigm shift where he had to leave and depart whatever future that he had foreseen for himself. And just left, flew into Beirut, from there went to Saudi Arabia and entered into Yemen again. And that's a moment where it was the beginning of what people were just about to find out. So it was a coup, it was a Nasserite supported coup. And then, the Egyptian army basically took presence, and Yemen was pushed into this situation where it entered into a war that lasted between 62 until 70. During that period, my father now basically leading forces against the Egyptians, and witnessing a lot of challenges in the first 3 years. The women of the family were also under house arrest, so it was like a race to try to bring out whoever was still in prison by the ability to have an exchange of prisoners, which was more or less delivered around 65. During that period, that's where my father basically met my mother. Her father was a tribal head, leading thousands of people under his responsibility, and during that period, coming towards the late 60s, my mother, moving from a very small town and village in the middle of Yemen, moved to Beirut, and that's basically where I was born. And I'm one out of a total of 11 siblings.
11.
I'm the fourth in terms of age, basically, and since then, it was Lebanon. I went to England and spent quite a while. The 70s more or less were in the UK, and went back to Lebanon, studied economics. Fast forward, I went to study economics again in Saudi Arabia and Riyadh. And from there, my first job was in Procter & Gamble, where I was in human resources. Beyond that, that's where that's also when I got married. I was quite young. I was around 25 when I got married, and And now I'm basically in Amman, Jordan. I have 4 children. My eldest has just graduated from school and she's been working out of London. And the other 3 siblings, or the other 3 children basically are here in Amman, one in the transitional period going to university, probably somewhere in Europe. And the youngest 15 and 13-year-olds are a handful. So, I mean.
And you were sharing before we started the interview, you were talking about different sort of ports of call or places that you have spent time in the United States. If we take that with all of your travels, I mean, tell me about the meaning of travel for you in your own development as a man.
Well, I mean, every individual takes every step in a specific journey in a different way. I mean, I used to take the opportunity when I got the chance to travel, to use that as an opportunity to get to know the culture and the people of the cities that I basically go and meet with. So I felt that at least within my limited time on this earth, I guess, or the contribution I could even give my children. I mean, looking at that they live in an extended family structure, so if they want to have fun, they can have that with their cousins and so forth. So whenever I got the chance to go to a specific city, I'd spend time in the libraries of the city itself, and visiting the museums of that specific city, understanding the history, the art, and just trying to go to the corners of that city that generally the tourists don't go to. So you get to feel and talk to individuals in a way that's totally different, and they share with you those experiences, and they really stick with you. Having or taking coffee, or having spending time in a cafe in Paris, or going to. I mean, one has had that opportunity of going east and west, and as far as Shanghai and to the east, and as far as Los Angeles and San Francisco to the west. So, and in between, that message that you get from travel is, there's so many billions of people living on this earth, and you have to be conscious that you need to understand the struggle that they all go through. The daily challenges that they witness, and to be humbled by it. And travel basically makes me humble. So it makes me feel what others go through, their aspirations, their interests, and what they want to achieve for their personal interest, families, and so forth. And it's very interesting that when you go across this universal trail, I guess, as you see that there's so many things that unify human beings. You sit with somebody in Shanghai, and she or he has interest, aspirations, pains, issues that are just so similar to anyone sitting in Cairo or in Amman or in Beirut or in any other place for that matter. So it's humbling to see that they're all facing the same issues, that they all have similar aspirations, that they all want to be better individuals, whether for themselves or for their families and the people that they care for. So I guess travel for me is always an invitation to be humble and to engage with communities to better understand your own weaknesses and what you can do, hopefully, to deliver that change for people around you.
Have you always had that sensitivity, like an emotional radar that you can pick up on the nuance? Because you speak to it as it being commonplace to you and your experience, but I would say that I wish there were more Yousefs.
Well, I mean, it does have it's rooted to an extent, and I think I try my best to do that also with my own children, and I hope that they can pick that up, going down the road. But it was really rooted in the way that I was brought up. I mean, I was brought up in a way where there's this. It's as if you're told. I was being basically always set up for being universal in your outlook. You have to understand others. You have to be tolerant of other cultures. You have to, and the only way that you can do that is by developing the knowledge curve that you have of those societies. That you don't build opinion without understanding the opinion of those that you're trying to judge. You never judge others unless you have a clear understanding of the context of those individuals that you want to judge, if you are in a position where you want to judge people. And judgment happens, it's not associated with any political or authority or any structure of power. Everybody basically goes into the cycle of judgment, and judgment creates reactions. You meet someone, and for some specific reason, if you've been brought up in a specific way, you already have a judgment of that individual. So the way that you react to that individual becomes very much influenced by what biases that have been created within you. So I think it's really the nature of how I was brought up, and it's attributed not that the context of things is my father, at least within our context, was married to 4 different wives, and he spent time between different places. So what in the context of how we were brought up was that the bar would be set high. So we would all understand exactly what did we need to do to deliver on these on the expectations that he had, and that also he and the social and cultural expectations of where we came from. So where I came from was always something that resonated, or was, let's say, top of mind, right? So, you have a 1,000+ year legacy, so you have to always be conscious of that. So I think it's a burden in a way, but it's a positive burden, So it ends up that you have to be universal. You have to basically be, you have to cater to understanding others, and you have to make an extra effort to understand others. Understanding others and knowledge is not something that just happens without exercise.
How do you understand the relationship to that burden? Is it something that you wear? Where does it reside within you, and does that change over time?
I'm 50 now, right? So I think that it had a lot of impact. It grows with you. Okay, so when I was 19, I started the first NGO or first nonprofit organization that wanted to focus on issues of heritage and so forth. And I remember at the age of 19, and we're going to, we're in McLean, Virginia, and we're with 2 or 3 other cousins, and we're meeting with this legal firm, and we're now convincing them we want to do this. And they're surprised. We were just a bunch of young kids, right? So. And then we're going out and convincing one of our aunts, which was like, she's in her early 40s. She has to be the president of this organization because we're not in the U.S. We're going back to the Middle East. So I think that looking at that in retrospect, it keeps growing, right? First of all, you might have an interest. The world for you is your family and your extended family. But then with time, you find that the world is not really just your family. It's the city, it's the country, it's the nation, it's the people around you, and I think that's really where it's continuously sharpened. Let's say my view of things. When I was in Procter & Gamble, I would take that experience when you're in human resources and P&G. What I really loved about that experience was that it fits so well in human resources with what my interests were also. So we were talking about organization excellence and people excellence, and how do we deliver both? And that if you can deliver organizational excellence or people excellence, then you deliver exponential growth. You deliver change, paradigm shifts. You get more market share. You sell more product, right? So these two simple statements also basically, you just pick them up and you keep growing, right? So if you add them with that universal interest, it becomes that, okay, well, how do I deliver people excellence at a national level, at a state level, at a city level?
So again, thinking very universal.
I think that, yeah, I mean, the life, at least from my opinion, doesn't have much meaning if one is consumed in self-preservation, right, or in personal success. You could be very successful, but you don't have any impact on the society that you exist in. You could take a lot from that. I mean, success is a translation of you taking from that society in some cases. Corporate social responsibility came as an outcome of corporates realizing that we've taken a lot, okay, and we've become very successful. And we were family businesses, from the times of the Carnegies or the Rockefellers. They took a lot, and now it's time for them to give back. So you find a lot of the endowments and a lot of the institutions that give back in the U.S. are really very much rooted in that philosophy. So I think that it would be much better for society if, from the get-go, your focus is not really to take from society, it's really to give back to society. So you want to design your career, your life, your livelihood. The definition of success is that success is not personal. Success is universal. So if you take that into consideration, then it does change how you decide on what job you take, what you work on and what you don't. So more or less, it's a very much an approach to life that has a lot of implications for the people around you.
If you don't mind me asking, I think it's incredibly fascinating, the history and that you're a descendant of the Prophet Muhammad. Talk about, because I don't think the West would have an understanding, and so I'll represent broadly. I'll take some license here, with all due respect and deference to the audience and to you, in trying to understand and to encapsulate how that would impact a life trying to think universally, trying to think beyond one's sort of physical self in the way in which they engage, support, understand, reconcile what's going on around them, and live in the 21st century.
Well, I mean, it's a big, responsibility that you could. I mean, it's a reality that you can't take away, right? I mean, it's just it's a fact. So how you live with that fact, you can have people that can just say, you know what, I don't want this to be the guiding torch for my life, and they take a different track or they take a different path. But overall, I think that it's the realization of what he represented. I mean, I was very much influenced by Thomas Carlyle. I mean, he basically wrote a book once called On Heroes and Hero Worship. And he selected these different heroes, the hero of the gods and hero of poets. And there was, in his opinion, the hero of all prophets. And Thomas Carlyle was a lecturer who was basically giving lectures in the UK, 19th century. And the way that he positioned that hero, first of all, that he selected Muhammad to be that hero, was because of the nature of the story and how it began, right? It was, and I was really touched by when he was describing, it was one man against all men. I mean, it was literally, and in a way, I mean, as a metaphor, it's like a startup moment. It's one individual coming in and sitting there and saying to everybody around him, listen, I mean, I think that this is the right thing that we all should do, right? We need to believe in in this context, the oneness of God, and but the message that he basically brought was new, disruptive, right? It was scary for the elite of that time. It meant that equality would be in place versus the structure that they had been very much used to and very comfortable with. It was interventionist. In many ways, he basically came in and said, well, you know what, there's this economic instability between the rich and the poor, and I have a suggestion in terms of how I want to address it. And it became very detailed. I think that what many might benefit by understanding is that the level of detail he spent, let's say, it's like a product, right? So he designed this product in a way that is a reflection of genius, regardless of, you believe in him being a prophet or not. But at that specific moment, this man designed the product, and that product took into consideration every potential element of life that you might get into. So, and on top of that, he said, well, this is not just for the Arabs. And him sitting there, I mean, if you sit in that moment where he's in Mecca, middle of nowhere, right? And to the east, you have the Persian Empire, and to the west, you have the Byzantine Empire, right? And you have the superpowers of that time. And he states that this is a universal message by sending these messengers out, and they go and meet with these representatives, and they say, hey, my name is Muhammad. I'm back in Mecca, and I want to tell you that I have this universal message that you all have to subscribe to. Okay, and it's not just a general statement; it's really detailed, and as I said before, it's very disruptive. So if you look at it from that angle, it really becomes an inspiration. That it's an inspiration of starting something from scratch. It's an inspiration of standing in front of a crowd with a different opinion and not basically being fearful of sharing that opinion. Of the agony of delivering whatever it is that you want to deliver. I think one element that those that don't see him as a prophet find much more enlightening and inspiring is that they see him as a human being. And many people that see his prophethood took away that humanity from him. He was a human being, and he is a human being, and he has his bad days and his good days, and in that context of him being a human being, the genius comes out. The commitment to the development of the product, right? So, the commitment to deliver it in so many different ways, right? And for it to be flexible, that it, exists today in 2022 in a way that really inspires me as an individual, where I see that that universal perspective that he wanted to get out, and the challenges that he was willing to overcome, and the disruption that he was willing to introduce, is one that guides me in everything that I do. I mean, so it's what is innovation other than being disruptive, right? And rejecting the status quo and saying, well, we need to change this because it's not working, and it's going against the crowd. It's not. It's being the odd one out, right? And not being intimidated by being the odd one out, because being the odd one out actually, as we've now realized, is the reason for humanity progressing. If it wasn't for these individuals that basically said, I don't think this is right, we would be in a different position today.
Was there a point when you were a young boy, that you internalized the relationship to the prophet? At what point, at what age did you, one, understand the gravity, and then, and maybe in the same vein, embrace?
Well, I mean, I guess it is, in my situation, very contextual. So this discussion started at a very early age. It started probably at the age of 13 and 14, when one had the opportunity of sitting with people, scholars, different backgrounds, different experiences, and opening up and having these continuous discussions. And the approach that when I was basically educated early on, I guess this is not your typical school education, but was that it was very it was rooted in arguments. So it was rooted in opinions being created by discussions. All right. So, and I think one very important point that I would highlight is, which actually maybe stands out in vis-a-vis the current today, I would say dominant approach to things, is the how I grew up looking at scripture versus reason or logic. Okay, and for us, or for me at least, when I was being brought up, logic supersedes or has this much higher position versus scripture. So if scripture doesn't fit with logic basically gets the upper hand, put it that way. So, and that guided the how does one embrace this message? It's a different opinion of what my relationship with Muhammad basically is and was, and so it's I think it's very much different than the hundreds of millions of Muslims today that might see it in a different way, which they see scripture having always an upper hand versus logic, so or reason, and I think that even applies to so many others. I mean, when you read The History of God by Karen Armstrong, you basically see that interesting parallel where if you bring together those that see reason is the upper hand that should guide us, I think the world will be in a much better place today. But since we basically take into consideration certain opinion, whatever that opinion is, it becomes the fortress that we live in, and we start to defend, and we feel that any encroachment on that fortress is an encroachment on us, and it becomes so difficult to create any bridges between people because there's no reasoning that can basically bring people together. So I think, that 15 up to the early my mid-20s is when really that the opportunity of reading, getting exposed to that line of thought was very much interesting, and it became second nature. I mean, this is how the discussion is between my elder brother and myself, or between my siblings, or between the community that surrounds me. It's always basically about how do we solve problems, because if you can always be content with the status quo again, and I would highlight another important piece of knowledge that I was exposed to, again a reflection of what he represented, is the issue of destiny, right? So I guess contrary to common understanding in many ways, is that we're not destined by any specific power to be this or that. It's what we create. It's what we do, and I think that the more that you believe that there's this that whatever superpower you, or super being or reason for existence that you believe in is interventionist to the degree of your day-to-day, the less creative and innovative I think that you might be. And so and the more apologetic you will be for actions that others might do, because maybe we were destined to be like this. So I think that it took away any. I think when you embrace that mindset that when one grows up with, it took away the ability to find any excuse. Right? If you fail, it's because you failed. If you did a bad job, it's because you just screwed up and you did a bad job. There's no excuse. You can't go and say, well, God basically destined this for me, or God wanted that. I mean, you can't bring God into the argument, and it creates this, in a way, this. You become very vulnerable to your reality, right? I mean, you want to change things, you have to work hard to change those things. There won't be any intervention that's going to come in and give you this miracle that will take you from this space to that space. So I think it's the message that stayed with me until today, where we as individuals can make the change that we want to make if we adopt that change and work hard for it. That's basically it.
We were talking before we were recording about my perception that the Middle East in general is a bit of a mystery to the West. And a lot of that is rooted in what is or isn't taught through schools or schooling for young people. So you mentioned that around 13 is when you started to learn about your family history, right? And these lessons, and you talked about sort of the vehicle of the argument. Can you take me in to a memory or paint that picture of what that looks like for someone who is not from this region, would not be able to even understand what that might look like? How many people are in the room? What's the experience like being a teenager? Are you there to listen? Are you there to participate?
Well, I mean, it was, first of all, it's just very intimidating. I mean, you're 13, 14, and you're being told to create an opinion. And you're being told that you in these specific issues, when it comes to theology and belief, you don't take up the opinion of others and you just adopt it. You have to go through the cycle of you believing in it, right? So, I mean, there's a big difference between knowing and believing in some things. So the first time was, I'm sitting with very old, fabulous gentleman. He was married to my father's cousin, and he was a really cool scholar, I would say, right? So, I mean, he would, this individual, I used to come over wearing a Redskin t-shirt, interested in football. I mean, something that I was interested in at that point in time. And I have all these questions in my mind, and for me, the easiest way out of this was just to say, okay, well, what's the right thing to say here? Is there like a right answer so I can just get out of the room? And his response to me and it was the issue of, does God exist, right? So, and he said, well, if I told you God does exist, that's not the right answer. Okay, you have to reach that opinion independently. I was like, I mean, I'm 14. I mean, how the hell am I going to basically do that? Well, I mean, that's how the journey begins, right? So he put me on this path where, and we start to have discussions, and it's all about, I would go and read about this opinion and that opinion, and come back and give him, that or start to talk about this, and then he would give his suggestions in terms of, or his critique, let's say, and I would take that critique and do something with it, right? Because he wasn't going to just make it a simple yes or no answer. So I think that's really one moment that I always basically go back to is someone who had the authority, who had the capacity to just tell me, this is how it is, and I could have just taken that home and lived with it. Instead, insisted that this is a personal journey, and you have to go through it the same way that I did, and the same way that everyone else has to. And he took me back to, because that's how it is. That's how it should be. I mean, that's how the Prophet basically became a prophet. That's how all individuals became whatever they wanted to become, right? They had the personal journey, and they had to create their own conviction, and they had to create their own opinion. And in doing so, that basically makes you unique and capable of opening up and not being afraid or difficult to get even intimidated by anyone, right? So and that has stayed with me for life. So
and how long was that? Something where, like, I almost picture like you were going every day, spending time with him, or give me some.
Yeah, I mean, it was come back from school, and I'd basically go back and like it was. I mean, school ends around 2 p.m. I think it was, at 2:30 or something like that, and I would be there around 4ish, 5ish. And my aunt, I mean, I'd call her aunts, and it was very interesting because we were living in this complex, and on that floor there were two aunts, right? Their husbands shared the same first name, just a coincidence, I guess. Two different families, Kuhlani versus Hadi, and the aunts had the first name, also shared the first name, Amat al-Malik and Amat al-Malik, and they influenced me in a way which was really different. I mean, his wife she was so calm and caring, right? And she would always make me a pot of tea, and she would basically always joke with me is that, and she would keep like 3 different cups basically in front of the pot, and she would fill them, the 3 of them basically, right? So, and she would tell me, you can leave class or leave the session after you finish the pot of tea, but to help you, the first cup will be a little bit too hot for you to drink, so I'll put in the other 2 glasses, and you can they'll cool down so that you can drink them faster. So if you wanted to get out of this session faster, and my other aunt, I used to pop in and see her, and she was the first one that really influenced identity, right? I mean, she had a picture of her father in magnificent, dress, and in 1927 in Rome, in Italy, right? He had headed a delegation from Yemen to Rome, and then just took me on a visual journey that has never ended. I mean, right? I mean, I just loved photography and capturing photography and collecting photos. I have like maybe around 3,000 to 4,000 photos that I've collected across time, but it's that journey, it's that individual who in 1927 was in Rome. Clearly, Benito Mussolini wanted to impress, so they showed him everything. I mean, the delegation was made of so many people. The parade was so long that one would think that he's the head of state when he wasn't. And it just stayed with me. It's that humble aspect of wherever you are, it doesn't really matter. If you appreciate who you are, and you're committed to a specific vision that you want to deliver, that guides you on in a continuous manner, right? So it was really an interesting point to see their influence in identity, who I am, and what I want to achieve in life, and in reasoning, and how do I basically look at things, and how do I analyze them, and how do I engage with them. So that, I guess, was a very interesting part or chapter in my life, which was something I miss a lot, and I miss them all basically. I mean, they've passed, and if it wasn't for them, I think that one would be on a different trajectory.
What, as you talk about them, it appears very much so that they live within you today.
Oh, very much. I mean, they, they're you always people that basically influence you. It's very difficult for you to. They become part of your DNA. You remember the laugh. The smile, the smell of the tea, the way that they walk into the room, the tone of their voice. It's just to the extent of, my father passed away, and I remember, for example, what people that really influence you give you these beautiful moments that just stay with you, right? I mean, I always remember my father taking me to school in England, and so he's driving, and it's snow, it's cold, and he wants to smoke a cigarette. Very old traditional Yemeni music, cassette player being played, a guy called Al-Harathi, and he cracks the window a bit just to basically keep the smoke out. But that moment just stays with you, right? It's relaxed. It's the moment where you always want to be in, right?
Shared space with your dad.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically something that you find very different and unique about the people that you lived with. Understanding, I mean, you put that in contrast against the challenge that he went through. His father being executed, his all the people around him that he knew executed, and then the restart, right? And the reset. You go from that in 1970 to 1970. It's a total reset. He has to rebuild everything from scratch, right? He's never going back to Yemen. He's going to live in as a political asylum in the UK at that point in time, right? So and it's the focus and the emphasis on one thing that he and all those that were there at that time agreed on, which was the only thing that we can do right now is to educate, and that's really the message that stays with me and stays with everybody that I talk to, is that education, knowledge, personal development, with this universal outlook is the fundamental gift that you can give your children and the people around you and the society that you want to influence. Educate them.
Headroom is produced by Old Soul, a one-stop marketing agency that understands the power of brand and nuance. Reach out to my guy Matt at Old Soul and supercharge your brand and content strategy. That's Old Soul. Shoot Matt a note at aoldsoul.com. That's AOLDSOUL.com. And now, back to our guest.
And we fast forward, and rumor has it, Yousef, that you were very passionate about Venture X, and that you really pushed hard to basically realize this sort of next step in supporting projects of interest. Tell me about how your past and even the experience of the T's, which is such a wonderfully, you painted such a beautiful picture, has gone into the passion of Venture X. Because when I think about it, you made the comment about the profit and startup, right?
Yeah.
And yet that's where we are today, is really supporting the progress of what next might look like, how it might be realized for people and communities and those universally. Talk a little bit about why Venture X, given your background and the way in which you see the world.
Well, I mean, Venture X, so I have to go back, 2011, 2012. So 2011, 2012, I just felt that I was in Saudi Arabia, living in Jeddah with my wife and kids, and I reached this clarity, let's say, that that impact that I wanted to realize was not really happening. And I could deliver financial and personal success, but it would be at the expense of doing what I wanted to really do, right? So and that would be, how can I influence others in a way that would change a social structure and allow it to be empowered, enabled, to be emboldened to deliver whatever aspirations that they basically had. And we did this assessment then, where we need to, we're going somewhere else. Okay? And at that point in time, we had different opportunities. England was an option, the UAE was another, and Jordan was also there, and Oman, Muscat. And we went and actually did these field visits where we basically did this assessment of how do we, where do we stay? And Jordan, I mean, has had a very long history with my family. Since my great-grandfather, more or less, there's been this involvement with Jordan. But I personally had not been in Jordan or lived in Jordan. My father spent some time here, but I didn't have any experience. I was brought up in Beirut. And I felt that actually, and when we spent time here, this was the perfect spot to use it as as this point where you can stand on and say, okay, well, how do we deliver this change? And the reasons were so obvious, right? I mean, the structure of the economy, the challenges of the region. 2012 was already, and historically, Jordan has always been challenged eastward, west, north, south, whatever. So you always had these very challenging situations from economics, politics. So how do you create this out of nothing, right? And I was really always impressed by the story of Jordan in terms of how it was created in the early 1920s. It was carved out of nothing, right? And look where it is today. So it's 100 years since then. And so so I felt that this is a place where potentially I can contribute and I can try to do something. And I was, blessed with the opportunity of having this random meeting with Faisal, and he invited me to consider leading an accelerator, a startup accelerator that was Oasis 500 then. It still is an active accelerator, but it was a different structure then. It was an opportunity for me to get to understand and long story short is I became the CEO of this entity. So. And that's where I started to formulate, okay, well, how do we do this? How do we do this in a different way? How do we, it doesn't work by just, copy and paste, to take the word startup and basically apply it in a Jordanian or Middle Eastern context, or take away all the verbatim, angel investors, venture capital, the whole value chain of how do we create value that is disruptive.
And why did it have to be different?
Well, because our context is very different. I mean, it takes us back to the point where the understanding of the Middle East, just to put a general baseline that people should basically should take into consideration when you're looking at the Middle East is the Middle East gives the impression that it's for some that maybe people speak multiple languages. Well, they don't. So the Middle East is not the right representation of the Arab world. So if you take North Africa from Morocco to the borders of Iran, Iraq basically, and you go from Syria down to Yemen, they all speak one language, right? So you have 400 million individuals that have one unifying language. Dialects, of course, might be different, just like they are in any, from state to state in the US probably, but not to the extent where they don't understand each other. They all do. The other very important revealing challenge, I guess, is the age issue, right? So this is a very young population. 75% are younger than the age of 35. In some countries, 60 would be under the age of 15. Okay, so 50% in many countries across the board would be under the age of 15. So you have a very young population. What does that mean? It means that the velocity of change that you can witness in a specific country is something that you can't witness anywhere else. Every 5 years, you can have a totally new society. If you're 10 years old, 5 years later you're 15, you could have a different adoption rate for concepts, ideas, values, principles. Everything can change for you. If you're 15, you'll be 20. So you could. So that velocity of change is something that you can't witness elsewhere. So And in an extended version of this region, you might find that applied across countries as far as Latin America and then as the whole Islamic world, if you take that as a common denominator, going back and going as far east as Indonesia and Malaysia. So that then translated the necessity that we need to be disruptive. Okay, we need to deliver exponential growth, and we can only do that if the numbers add up. So having one accelerator in Jordan will not basically give you that change, or having 20 across the Middle East or 30 or 40 will also not do so. Corporates are saturated. Government agencies are saturated with the employment of the masses that they basically employ. So the accelerator concept evolved with me. That it's not about accelerating startups. It's about accelerating change because this young generation demands that change, and they need that change. And acceleration, again, for me, became a tool to level the playing field. Right? So if you looked at the last 50 or 100 years, like any other society, the economics play in favor of those that were landlords, and then they became business people using their assets as collateral to progress themselves. And that, you could see that even in the US and Europe and any other place, frankly. The ownership of land was the basis for progression. Capitalism, was very much rooted in that. And struggles were always about how do we level the playing field, right? Marxism only happened because the issues of capitalism were a growing philosophical issue that we're not basically delivering equality for the masses. So acceleration and startups and creating new ideas and supporting new ideas levels the playing field, because the first couple of things that we witness in a new concept or a new idea or a new startup is that a startup is only successful if you deliver exponential growth. So therefore, you deliver exponential growth in income, and the average income within that structure is much higher than the average income outside of that, let's say, economic unit. The second thing is wealth. The founders own a piece of that startup, right? So if that startup does deliver exponential growth, then the individuals themselves grow in wealth because their equity values and appreciates on a continuous basis. The third thing is that if you are successful, you disrupt on a much larger audience in the Middle East, right? And in the Middle East, if you look at agri-food tech, we all started with talking about Hasad, and why was Hasad? Because the bulk of the world works in farming. Regardless of the numbers, but one could say that the majority of people that work today are farmers, or involved in farming, or involved in the cycle of food production, or are heavily impacted by getting this to the shelf or whatever. So the whole cycle, the whole value chain is basically something that you can benefit from. Unfortunately, and when you look at the economics of the farmer in the Middle East, then that farmer is the last in the value chain when it comes to benefiting from the dollar that was created because of him. Right? So acceleration and startups disrupt that and reward him more, or reward her more, for that matter, right? So you find that acceleration, innovation, disruption in general, in the innovative aspect of it, levels that playing field where the founders are getting better, their income is getting better, they're becoming more wealthier, and even across the value chain, everybody's benefiting, because you only disrupt if you find people solving a problem for the farmer. So the farmer now can sell directly into export, let's say, or
so change is inclusive.
change is very inclusive. And for me, that was it fit with the narrative that I always was interested in, is you can deliver personal success, but it could be very exclusive. And you want to be inclusive. You want to have this universal impact. So how can you do that? You do it by pushing this narrative forward, by localizing it to fit our unique situation. So maybe we don't need to use the word entrepreneur if it's going to be alien to the people that you're talking to. Maybe the word startup. I mean, if you look at it, when you give a startup $30,000 in a Middle Eastern context, if you gave an SME $30,000, I mean, you could see that SME flourish and grow exponentially in the same way that you might have seen a startup do that, right? And it took us away from traditional thinking. So it meant that we wanted to accelerate the whole at a national level. And that's how the discussion happened. So, Walid and I used to always have these discussions since we were involved, or I was at least then the CEO and he was on the board in that context at the times of Oasis. And I felt that Oasis was not going to be that platform, right? And so I got the opportunity and the chance to, play with these ideas. I mean, I was asked to lead something called the Innovation Solution Board, which was an opportunity for me to depart from Oasis and spend like a sabbatical of a year, where I was doing nothing but really dedicated myself to how is this going to work, right? And what does it mean that we want to accelerate? I mean, one can just say, and you can write it up and talk about it, but how do you really deliver it? And it wasn't really rocket science. I mean, you went and looked at the global innovation indexes and you went and saw what other countries were basically doing. But for me, it was much simpler than that. It was what were we doing, right? I mean, we have a youth, a platform of youth. We have so many young and bright minds, tested in other situations. If you go anywhere in the Gulf, for example, predominantly, I mean, and you walk into the IT organization of this telecom or that telecom, this bank or this or that bank, you might find that there's a lot of Jordanians sitting there, right? And so engineers, people who build structures. So the human capital was tested, but we were not inspiring enough anymore for that talent. So you found, so I spent time during that year just walking campuses, walking, as they say, walking through the aisles, right? So, and talking to people. And you found that the top 2-3% wanted to do something else in their lives, right? I want to do a master's PhD program and I'm going to do it outside of Jordan. And then the top 15% following that were saying, you know what, I'm going to basically go and get a job outside of the country. And then, the 15% after that were basically more or less very much interested in freelancing, because freelancing can give them much more income than if they were doing a job. And then the end of the bell curve, the expectations of them from the sector were so high that they just didn't make sense. I mean, my first job, as I said, was human resources in P&G. You don't deliver people excellence by taking someone out of uni and telling him or telling her, you have to code and this is what you need to do and you need to deliver this and that. And they just came out of, they're wet behind their ears. I mean, they need guidance, right? They need career progression. They need incubation. They need someone to believe in them, to become that, what I started to term as the first believer. So I took this metaphor from the Prophet, basically, is the importance of being that first believer. You have to believe in these individuals, right? And even in the context of angel investing, I mean, it's how things start and begin, right? I don't think that many might appreciate the reality that this whole thing that began 1,400 plus years was bankrolled by the first angel investor, and she was Khadija, right? And she was the love of his life. I mean, but she believed in that individual to the extent that she was financially committed, and And if it wasn't for that financial capacity, this would have basically totally, found a very short end to the whole story. So I think that element of being sensitive to what this group of minds need is that they need individuals to believe in them, to level that playing field, to give them the opportunity to improve their income levels in a way that is dramatically better than if they had a job, and even if they were freelancers. So now you're starting to go more and more towards the retention of that talent and the retention of those ideas within your own society, right? So if I'm a PhD program, or I'm interested in doing a PhD, I would, I'll basically go out and innovate, create that intellectual property. But there's now this program, this acceleration, this incubation that can anchor that IP, grow it for me, and reward me for it, right? So everything starts to, I can solve problems at a national level, and then I can take these problems and solve them and use them, and as I apply them and validate them on a more regional level, and then I can take them on a more global level, because it starts from everything has a start, and the end is basically what you decide.
You talk about it as if you're almost creating a family-like experience.
Yes, it is. I mean, at the end, when Venture X, moving from that 1 year, we started to see that the tool that would realize this would be a new venture, and we didn't really have a name for it, so we just thought, okay, well, X, so Venture X, right? So I guess some might say
there was a lot of whiteboarding going on.
Yeah. I mean, and it was really just making it really simple. It's okay. What are we going to do? We're going to basically create a platform which can cater to the aspirations of the audience that we wanted to work with, and be that network. Be that safety net. Be a family in a way, right? And talk to them. And the program really started to become more of just talking to each other. Right? It wasn't like initially when people think about acceleration and startups, it's like these building blocks. You have to do this and you have to do that and you do that.
It's like plug and play.
Yeah, and my approach was that, and the thinking there was that no, it's about having a discussion. It's about and that discussion should potentially give way to creating a strategy, and I started to talk more about we have to be again very humbled by the word strategy. Strategy is a big word, right? I got the chance to hear A.G. Lafley, who used to be CEO of Procter & Gamble, and for it was 9-10 hours talking about strategy, and it just gives you the context that this is a big word, and you just don't throw it into a discussion. This is my strategy. So the discussion was all about how do you really create something that's very unique and different for you, and that becomes your strategy, and it differentiates you. It makes you stand out. It gives you an edge. It gives you more market share. It gives you a share of voice. It allows you to be more instrumental in creating a need for those that you're trying to solve a problem for. So they need you. They want to use this product or this solution that you basically have, or if it's not a solution, if it's not even technical, because we then had this debate where, but is it just technical? And we decided that the second accelerator we were going to build, the first one was in agri-food tech, Hasad, and the second one was in the creative industries. All right, so how can I convince this young lady and her passion is for dancing, on becoming part of a dance company, right? And that's not technology, but it's something that you want people to succeed in. It's not everybody has to be successful in tech. It's I want to be successful in theater, in film, so we created ibda', which was the Arabic word for creativity and innovation. And it became our response to advocating that the accelerating economic growth is not going to be done by one specific sector. It has to be all sectors, and they all have to be on board, and you have to address their different and diverse requirements. And so you step back again and you find, okay, well, what's the bigger vision? Let's ask ourselves again, what's the bigger vision? So the bigger vision was we wanted to accelerate, and we wanted to do that at a national level. So we advocated with the Ministry of Digital Economy and Entrepreneurship here in Jordan, and they adopted, and we launched a strategy. I call it a strategy versus a program, which was Accelerate Jordan. Is how do we accelerate the whole of the whole country, right? How do we deliver faster, stronger results? Because we have this youth bulge that is going to be very demanding. And we can't wait 5, 10, 20 years until things get fixed. So you have to do it at a much, much faster rate than anything else. So
that matches the young population.
It has to basically meet their expectations and their aspirations, and it has to be designed around them, not around yourself. Okay. Some, for example, have advocated, and then I guess that's my personal opinion, but is that we should. Some talk about outsourcing, and that Jordan or Egypt should be an outsourcing center. I always feel that whenever you start to design things around what corporates want, you're not really designing things around what people want. And if you design around what people want, people will surprise you. They'll surprise you that they have much higher expectations. They want a much better life than what you wanted to offer them. And keeping them at a specific cap is you're capping dreams, and you're capping potential, and it doesn't work. And I think that the more that you give people voice and the opportunity to own their destiny, right? They have the right to be more demanding, and it's now on you to work on designing something that can meet them halfway, so that you really can get the opportunity of delivering something in the next 3 years, and then the 3 years after that. Okay, so I think that the importance of designing around people is also it makes you much more inclusive, and it gives you the opportunity to be more attentive to what it is that they need and they require, and that's why we did a partnership with the Royal Film Commission, because and we started to educate people, right, with the Jordan Media Institute, talking about media, and talking about things that, how do you become this great creative director that can create this creative agency that can be competitive and compete with Leo Burnett or Saatchi, right? How can you grow and start to capture clients by sitting in an office in New York? Okay? And for me, the other very important element is focusing on cities versus we just want to grow. And I know that a lot of focus has always been around going from Jordan to the region. For me, it's going from Jordan to a city, and there are 2-3 cities that I see are what I call growth catalysts. A city like Berlin in Germany. If I can take a startup, if I can take someone from here to validate and grow, to capture more ideas, to enrich and get more access to R&D and research, and to share notes, and then use that also as a platform to basically capture more capital. You serve both regions, right? You serve a better understanding of these societies. You complement views. A city like Amsterdam, London, Paris. And spending time there, you really get to understand that These are opportunities to bring more talent, to diversify your team, to be capable of doing things that can serve a greater purpose. I was once invited by the World Bank to work on launching Startup Jamaica, right? Out of the blue, right? I mean, so, and what I noticed there is a great opportunity, an opportunity for Jordan to work on launching a startup program, the first startup program of its kind in Jamaica, because Jamaica for me represented that opportunity of diversification. You had people who spoke English, and you did that quite well, but just around the corner you basically had people who spoke French and Spanish, and you add Arabic to that, and you have the whole universe at your feet, more or less, right? These are the languages of the world today, more or less. I mean, if you don't add Chinese, but so it's always about growth and how do you grow, and again, if you design things around people, you really will always be surprised by what they want to achieve.
So I want to talk about your relationship with saying yes and or saying no in the context that when you were 14, you learned an early lesson through your 3 cups of tea that it wasn't about just getting the answer that you thought you needed to put forth, but it was about your journey, which of course, or it seems too easy to show the parallel to an incubator, to a youth that has an idea. So how has your role in understanding the power of self-discovery impacted your ability to support those that are a part of Venture X?
Well, I mean, one thing that I found challenging is that it's very alien to people. The bulk of those that I more or less have interfaced with is that they, I've had the chance to work with more than 180 startups, and speaking to founders, and when I say worked with them, is you've worked closely, but in terms of exposure, you talk to a startup. I remember this tour I did, and a startup in Shanghai, thinking in the same framework and mindset in a startup that was in Berlin. We were there in Helsinki for Slush, and there's this one common denominator amongst many of them is that they want hand-holding. I mean, they want to be told what to do. And that's sometimes their expectation of a accelerator or of a program once they join it, is that they come into it with the assumption that you know more than them, right? And therefore you need to tell me what I need to do. And I remember a discussion I had at the Innovation Solution Board, because there was a board, and people were saying, well, now we have to guide people. And my response to that was that if I'm guiding them, then I'm not getting the best of the crop. I mean, they're supposed to be.
You're capping their participation.
Yeah, and exactly. And I need to be with people that are smarter than me, that are intelligent, that can design something that I don't even understand what the hell it is, and to be capable of making this an invitation to unleash that even further, right? So it's and that's alien to many individuals. So the first thing is, the first cohorts we had were just like all the other cohorts we used to work with, which were ex-employees. So first and foremost is that journey of self-exploration, in my opinion, of course, and this is just my opinion, has been handicapped by so many things, right? So, and then they move away from the company that they worked with a set of beliefs, a set of convictions, an approach to things that they want to go and apply, and they want you to assist them in that application. So it's not the innovation that you want to see and witness, and they're very much leaning on give me cash or give me guidance, right? give me some capital.
They're focused on the ending, not the journey.
Not the journey at all. I mean, we took away some things, right? So one, these accelerator programs are call them sweat equity programs in a way, right? So we don't give capital. Do you want to have this discussion, right? Well, then this discussion is going to translate itself into equity in your company, in your startup. If you appreciate that, then great. If not, then we don't need to have this discussion to begin with. But still, with that, it was alien to them. It was they still wanted someone to tell them, do I go right or do I go left? Should I do this or should I do that? And that made us do this pause. And we're talking as if there wasn't a crisis called COVID-19, right? A pandemic that basically took us into a freeze point in 2020 and 2021. But even during that, in the discussions going online and living in that situation and accommodating that drastic, stressful moment in our lives, was that we need to work with people that are more open to creating something that's totally new. Okay, they're at their starting point. So yeah, let's go back a little bit earlier, and I did this research, it's not like focus groups and quantitative and qualitative. It's like dipstick research, right? So where at least I looked at that 180, 200 startups, and I saw that 99% of all of these individuals are ex-employees. Their first startup is, and that's their first startup, right? So why don't we step back and go and encourage the creation of the first startup to be back on campus, right? And that's where your first startup should come from. And we went back to campuses and started to talk to students and, freshmen, sophomore, juniors, seniors. Why aren't you starting a company? That you're going to basically end up 4 years down the road, you're going to graduate. You know that the average income you're going to get at the current offerings that companies will give you is not something that meets your expectations. Why aren't you basically launching a company, right here and now? And you have this beautiful environment. I mean, it's a small village. It's 35,000 students in the Jordanian university. It's subject matter experts at arm's length. You can go into this college or that college. You can meet people. You can test ideas. And the beautiful thing about that is, about this segment of youth, it is the segment that you want to serve to begin with, right? It is the segment that you want to design around. And they are arrogant, which is good. I mean, they are anti-status quo, which is exactly what you want, right? They're not happy with their current situation, which is the best position that you want to be with and talking to. So they don't have respect for you. A
willingness to go into the fray.
Exactly. I mean, and when you come into that discussion, right? The discussion becomes much more genuine. All right, so you want me to respect you? What are you going to add to this discussion? So then it really becomes much more fun, and then it becomes a much richer cycle of development, and then it becomes a much important exercise where you're designing. Bringing it back to the point I mentioned earlier, where you're designing around the majority. You're designing around the people themselves, and they, as I keep always saying, is they will surprise you. I mean, they will be smarter than you. They will be much more in touch with the realities that you might have missed, and they want to deliver change because they have a totally different perspective on what change is versus what you've already defined it and now you're happy with and you're comfortable with, right? So, and they want to move you at an accelerated step that makes acceleration then really work.
Have you found that your capacity to change has matched the velocity of the youth that you're working with?
Well, I mean, as I said, I mean, it is alien to many, because the educational system, the social structure, does not invite self-exploration, right? You're always told, when you go and you listen to a lecture sometimes, or if X is wearing a religious cloak or whatever it is, he's telling you that you need to be content with what you have, right? And you need to accept where you are. I mean, that's in a way a universal message. If you're sitting in a church in Mexico City, or if you're in a mosque, or if you're in a synagogue anywhere else, or society in general, it's always about being content. Why do you want to leave this and do something totally different?
You become a prisoner of your own mind if you're
content.
It
is. I mean, and the Arab world in Jordan and anywhere else is not alien to that universal negative message, in my opinion, of course. And is this acceptance? You get married and you're told you have to work hard to keep that marriage working. But what if it's not working, right? I mean, it's just not working. Divorce is not a bad thing. It's not a stigma that I'm going to basically carry, that I got divorced or that she got divorced. So that creates this situation where where people think in that form. So when you're inviting them to think in a totally different way, it becomes very alien to them. It's very alien to their own societies, to their extended families, and so it's been slow, okay. But it's a journey. I mean, you could say we kicked this off in April of 2019. Okay, so we got to the first cohort. And from a conceptual perspective, we got to the first cohort towards the end of the year. That cohort was split half between talking to, just having a discussion and getting into COVID. And then everything else went online with all the challenges and the issues that you can't function in the same way that you can function. So you have 2 years and a half, I would even say. I would even extend it from a practical perspective. I would say that we have 4 years that we have written off. It's 2 years in COVID, but even beyond that, there's it's people getting out there again, and it doesn't happen overnight. People still are scared, and we just went from that to a conflict that's right next door in a way, and we have been living in a conflict, and things just get worse and worse. And if you're in Lebanon, you're struggling that you don't have electricity or even a functioning government. Prices are going up. People are really afraid. So you still have another 2 years where people will start to get back to normal in a way. And I think then that within this opportunity, you're going out and telling individuals, have a reset in your life. I think that there are things that also contributed positively. We all know about the Great Resign, and that.
You know what I've heard recently? I wonder what your take is on this. I heard this in New York just recently, the largest collection of CEOs around the world. They talked about the Great Reset.
I mean, it's a reality where during that last 2 years, people saw themselves in the mirror, right? And everybody started to look at life in a different way. And in that context, work was not the fundamental purpose. Financial success was not the end in mind.
The power differential shifted.
Yeah,
the value.
I want to basically have a legacy. I want to influence the society. We started to hear more about. I mean, we used to hear it before, but now even at in a much more louder setting where impact investing. We want to be impactful in our approach to life. We want to be in impactful jobs. My son comes to me and says, I'm going to go down and buy used clothes. I mean, okay, why are you doing that? Because I don't want to basically be part of this negative cycle where I'm negatively impacting the environment that surrounds me. You see people much more relaxed, and in that they reflect more, and they want to take control. They want to take more control of their own lives.
Authorship.
Yeah, they want to be the writers of their own chapter.
So Yousef, if you and I are sitting down and let's say 4 to 6 years from now, how will you be evaluating, and success can be a very loose term, how will we talk about success of Venture X, given all the sort of starts and stops and the reset? How do you envision that discussion going?
Well, I mean, there are 3 basic points that I mentioned earlier on. I mean, did we deliver a portfolio of companies from a number perspective? So 5 years down the road, do we have 600, 800, 1,000 companies that we've created that have become one of 2 things, but in general that they have delivered above average income for the people that founded them. That they've delivered wealth for those that founded these entities and these companies. And I don't make a distinction between a lifestyle business and a startup. I mean, at the end, it's doing something that you want, and it's us basically participating in that journey. And it's, did you contribute to the disruption that leveled the playing field? And how do you measure leveling the playing field? Is if you took a sample from the circle of influence that this specific startup or idea wanted to influence, did it make a change in their average income and in their wealth that they wanted to deliver for them? So if this startup worked with that farmer 5 years from now, 6 years from now, 10 years from now, did the farmer become richer? Did the farmer basically become more affluent? Was he capable of serving his children in a much better way? Did you give that individual a sense of being? And while you, the startup, gained and grew and developed further and further. So I think that these are the key fundamental variables that will measure success for Venture X in all the programs that we're launching, and the capital that we want to deploy, and the investments that we want to manage. And I think that's really the philosophy that's guiding us and how we want to measure it.
Let's close with this, Yousef. When I think back, again, I'm going to leave this interview and I'm going to be thinking about those 3 cups of tea. Is it fair to say that as you progressed in those conversations that bordered on arguments for you to learn, that you were okay with the heat of the tea, meaning that you would be there for longer periods of time because of what it meant to the development of you as a young man, that you enjoyed? You went there thinking, how can I get out of this, to how can I stay longer?
I think you really summed it up. You get this, if you don't enjoy what you do, and if you don't build up a passion for it with time, then it's not what you're supposed to be doing. I started at that very young age where this is not something I wanted to do, where, this is something that I want, that I miss. I mean, I want to go and have that tea. I'm waiting for that pot of tea to come out, and I'm enjoying. At the end, it used to get really cold because I'm just enjoying that session, right? And I think that differentiating point, which is how much do you really want this, is something that I've seen that the more you see it in a founder or in any other individual, that's when you see results. Okay, it's really, they really want this. But if it's okay, you know, yeah, I like this. It's a nice to have. That, you know, you reach a point where anything will distract you, and you'll just move on to something else. That fire within inside you to keep you going doesn't exist, and if it doesn't, you're not going to basically deliver any change, whether for yourself, the way I describe change. I mean, as I said, you can be financially successful, but empty from inside. You could, you know, deliver a lot, but you don't have a message. You don't have a narrative that you can be very proud of when you talk to your children about it, and they can be proud of you because, well, you know what? She wants to be an artist, and she became an artist regardless of everything else. I'm very proud that my mother is an artist. I think that's the best relationship you can have between any two individuals, you know, mother, daughter, mother, son, friends, or whatever, is that they have this passion that they all respect, and it inspires them, and it's an aspiration for them to keep going on.
Well, you've inspired me during this discussion. You've filled my cup, and I hope that of the audience. And I would say that the next time I'm in Amman, I would love to share a pot of tea with you as a way to close the loop on an incredible conversation. Thank you for your time, your transparency, and for enlightening not just myself but the audience.
Well, thank you a lot. Thank you for the opportunity, and looking forward to having that cup of tea.
Thanks for taking the plunge into Headroom, where we uncover the why behind the what and who impacting our lives. Headroom is a production of Rainlight and co-produced by our friends at Old Soul. I'm your host, Dr. Rod Berger, and this is Headroom.